Mr. Peters, it's so nice to see you. You are my very first guest on Law Break. So I'm very, and it was a very interesting conversation that we had back then. It was on the Maplehurst scandal. Um, I'm just always very happy to chat with you because I find you a very interesting person. You always have a lot to say. You're always very busy and very active. And today we're going to be talking about something that I know you know a lot about. I'm going to be learning again a lot from you, but it's also a very interesting topic. We are still in Black History Month. We're still in the month of February. As we're getting to a close or an end of the month, I wanted to have you as my guest to talk about actually a very interesting topic, which is the relationship between the police and the Black community. Uh, there's a long history there, and I know you're going to be talking a little bit about that. There has been recognition by the Canadian courts of racial profiling. We don't even need to guess now about it. We are at a stage where it's officially recognized by courts.
Yes,
But then the issue is, well, it's still there though. What is going on? Is there any progress? And I know we're going to be talking about an incident that you recently witnessed, and we're going to be talking about this subject, an argument that we hear sometimes made, especially by Crowns, about racial profiling, that, well, there is no racial profiling in this case because the police officer was himself Black or racialized. We're going to
right.
be talking about this point. So let's just start. Maybe you wanted to talk a bit about some of the background about the interaction between the police and the Black community, Mr. Peters.
Yes, well, thank you very much. So because the Black community is a small population, it's less than 2% of the population in Ontario. And
The minority,
yep,
yes.
and we're a racialized minority who came to North America from slavery, and some people came later on from Africa and the Caribbean. But there has been tension since the early 1900s with the police and Black people, and in the 70s and 80s, it rose with the shooting of some Black men, Buddy Evans in 1978, Albert Johnson in 1979, Lester Donaldson in 1988, and that gave rise to the formation of the Black Action Defense Committee by Dudley Laws, Charlie Roach, Professor Akua Benjamin, and others. And there was an inquest into Lester Donaldson's case. Um, and the shooting of Black people continued. Wade Lawson, Raymond Lawrence, Albert Moses, Hugh Dawson, and a Chinese man named Edmund Yu. He was killed by the police because he had a hammer in his hands. Same with Andrew Loco. But the thing about it is there was a lot of unrest before within the Black community. For example, in 1992, there was the Yonge Street riot. I was a university student at the time, and because of the Yonge Street disturbance, at the time it was Premier Bobray, he introduced the Commission on Systemic Racism in the Criminal Justice System. So Justice Cole and a lady named Margaret Gittins were the co-chairs of that um, commission, and Dr. Owusu Bempa, who now is a professor at the University of Toronto, he worked with them as a researcher, but it resulted in a very thick report that was commissioned in 1995 but never implemented. You had, if you jump to recently, you had Toronto police doing street checks on Black people, mostly Black people, where they were carding people. And because of that, you had two reports from Justice Tulloch. You had
Mhm.
a report into street checks, and you had a report into independent police oversight. So he did two different reports recently into policing, some of which resulted in changes in the law. But you also had during the Black Lives Matter protests, which originated firstly from Minnesota.
Yeah.
Um, but you had and Black activists, Black lawyers, Black social justice persons, and not only and allies who were white, South Asian, Chinese, everybody camped out for days outside of police headquarters in Toronto to demand changes. But I mean, you have a lot of inquests that occurred, including the local inquest into the killing of Black people. And Black people are still being killed in large
Oh.
numbers by the police,
Hmm.
you
So,
know.
well, that's the thing. So we have these inquests, and inquests ultimately they lead to recommendations. It's
Yes,
up then to the police to to um, uh, apply them or to take these recommendations or not. Um, but then the issue here, and you mentioned that there have been some legislative changes, but
yes,
then the question is, this is all nice. It's nice to have reports. It's nice to have changes in the law, but then what matters to a civilian, a Black person is, or any other ethnic person is in practice, are there really some changes? Why do we still have cases in court where this argument of racial profiling is being alleged, where it seems like there's still situations where the police interact in a more in a different and in a more violent and aggressive way when the subject is Black or racialized? Because I mean, we're talking here about Black people, but I think the same argument can be made also for Arabs, Latinos, or people of other minority groups as well.
yeah,
So that's what I find is a little bit concerning here, is that it's nice that we have reports, it's nice to have recognition,
yes.
but that for the average person, that doesn't really do anything, doesn't change their daily lives.
Well, because there's different degrees of racism. So you have implicit bias, you have unconscious bias,
Yeah.
you have unconscious racism, you have racism that's blatant, you have systemic racism, systematic racism,
Yeah.
institutionalized racism, and all of that is embedded within the structure of policing and the criminal justice system itself. It infects judges, it infects crown attorneys, it infects even some defense lawyers, and it's particularly rampant in policing and corrections.
And well, we've also I mean, we know that there is a this subconscious treatment, and one thing that I find is also disturbing, to connect it a bit to something that's currently ongoing, that's breaking in the news. It's the a corruption scandal of the Toronto police. That was really problematic. Well, in a way, it kind of, like defense lawyers and criminal lawyers, we know that there are some issues with police action, the way they do their searches and seizures, but that's bigger. That's more of a scandal when it comes to corruption and them working with criminals. In a way, there is also some kind of racism there in a different type, in that they are helping some criminals and not others. Because from a criminal perspective, a person, let's say, who's a criminal, he's like, well, why is this guy being getting helped by the police, is getting information, is getting access to stuff, and I'm not? So it also raises this issue. This is a different type of racism, but also it's favoritism and a different treatment by the police, based also, it could be on race and other issues as well. So I mean, when there's a corruption problem with the police, how can we fix this issue? Like, how can we trust, I guess, is the main question here.
Well, there've always been a distrust between the Black community and the police because let me be quite frank with you. Young Black people were complaining that the police were fueling violence in their community.
Fuel.
by passing on information, and sometimes it was false information just to create tension between groups. You also had black
Out of
people.
nowhere.
That's right. Sometimes you had black people um, alleging that police were robbing them. So, somebody may be involved in gambling or drug dealing, and the police would seize their product and give it to people that they were controlling on the streets to sell, and that came out in this recent scandal as well, because the police were charged with trafficking in substances.
Mhm.
You had situations where the police would not only rob drug dealers, but they would rob other civilians who they arrest. You had a recent case at 52 division, sorry, where an officer was charged because he was stealing property that were lodged by prisoners. And I recently had a case that I posted on X that's ongoing where somebody that worked for a different police service, a black man who worked for a different police service, was arrested for trespassing at the MLSC, the Scotiabank Arena, when he paid $5,000 to get courtside seat tickets. They didn't believe that this black man belonged in that section, arrested him and his son, kicked his son out, but took him into custody, released him later on, and found out that he worked for another police service, called the other police service, and got adverse consequences that befell him and his daughter, who both work for the same police service. Toronto police called that service. And so, because he filed a OIPRD, not no LECO complaint, Law Enforcement Complaint Authority complaint. So that was retaliation. So I recently filed a human rights application about that. But I mean that the corruption scandal that hit Toronto police is the tip of the iceberg, because we've
Yeah.
always been receiving reports about different aspects of corruption,
Mhm.
but the allegations were, most of the time, the allegations were not taken seriously by the police, not taken seriously by crown attorneys, and not taken seriously by judges. You know, persons have appeared before court and given evidence about what police officers have done. The police officer may have conducted a search warrant execution, and the person may have $30,000 in their condo or their house or wherever it is, and the police officer only turns over $15,000,
Yeah.
or they may not turn over anything at all because
And
they already have the sense that if there's no video that recorded it, then it's their word against the suspect or the accused word, and the system is so designed that in a credibility contest, most of the time the police officers win unless there's objective evidence that supports it.
it is so true. And this is a very frustrating part, I think, of our work as defense lawyers. We see that in court, that even, as you said, sometimes judges tend to believe officers. They kind of seem to have this with the courts, this aura of credibility that whatever the officer is saying would be more believable than what the accused young black man says. And it is frustrating because we know, and the point that you're making about the money that is being reported versus the actual amount seized, and there being a difference. It's also something that my guest on the previous episode, Alison Craig, also mentioned that very often she'll have clients who will say that, well, they had a certain amount with them when they were arrested, and then the police only reported a smaller amount. And
Yep.
it is problematic because, like, what you're mentioning is that they will take that money, they'll do whatever, and it's being revealed now, at least with the Toronto police, being used for illegal purposes. Like, it seems like it's unfortunately a big scandal. And as you said, it seems like what we know so far is just the tip of the iceberg, which is pretty scary because it looks like there's more to come on this scandal. But then it just then makes us wonder then, well, all these reports and all these like all this talk that we have in cases and these observations by courts and judges, because judges do recognize as well that there is a racial profiling problem. Um, why isn't it getting better though? Like, why do we still have the same issues, it seems?
Well, we have the same issues repeatedly because, of course, these police officers have very strong unions.
Mhm.
They also have the city or the province that hire lawyers to protect their interests. And even though they say, well, we're doing data collection, we're involved in intensive training yearly to train these police officers to disabuse themselves of their own bias. We still have police officers appearing before the court saying that they've never personally interacted with Black people until, they got posted to certain communities. And that is shocking in this day and age where you're cross-examining a police officer and they've never really had friends who are Black people or personally interacted with Black people. And let me say that even though sometimes even Black police officers profile other Black people because of part of the subculture that they're involved in policing.
And this is exactly like a point that we want to get into because this is an argument that I hear often, especially that's made especially by Crown attorneys. When defense want to raise this argument of racial profiling, the counter argument is usually, well, no, there is no racial profiling. The police officer himself is Black. So if you can just tell us, do you agree with that? That if the police officer himself is racialized or Black, so he can't be racially profiling someone, Mr. Peters?
No, I don't agree with it. It's a faulty argument because even in even recently, we have Black police officers who the tribunal or who courts find have racially profiled Black people. We have brown officers, South Asian officers who have racially profiled Black people. We have Black people, police officers who have profiled uh, persons who may be Arab or persons who may be
Muslim, obviously from a
Muslim.
Muslim
And
culture.
so, it's culture.
Hmm.
And it's also internalized bias because, as you can see, I have dreadlocks. I'm a Black man with dreadlocks, and a Black police officer can see me and either think I'm a musician or a drug dealer. They may not see me as a
A
lawyer.
lawyer, yeah.
Even a Black policeman could see that. And, a Black person may look at me with dreadlocks, even though I'm Black, and they're Black, and they may say, this person looked dirty.
Yeah,
This person looked dirty, unclean, unkept because I have my facial hair and my dreadlocks.
yeah.
So I say that because you know it's Black History Month, but there's internalized racism as well,
Hmm.
and that can go over to your professional sphere.
Yeah, yeah. Which is sad. And I know that there is actually a clip that we wanted to show because this is something that you recently witnessed part of this incident. So maybe I'm going to play that clip now since we're talking about this topic of Black cops interacting with Black civilians, and we can come back on this. I'm just going to
Yes, thank you.
uh, just get that video.
But while you're loading it up, let me say that
Yes.
there's a case that you know because a lot of lawyers watch this program. There's a case that was recently decided, and it's called the Robert Cameron case.
And I will
RV
put that,
Robert Cameron,
I will put that link.
2025,
Yes.
ONSC 2621. And that was a case where a brown police officer arrested a black person, and the judge that ruled in that case was Renu Madan. So she's a brown justice who was a former chief commissioner of the Human Rights Commission. She found that racial profiling was at play, and she wrote extensively on it.
And I will put that I will put that reference in the description of this episode. So I'm sharing the screen here. This is a video that you took. I know you posted that on X, on your socials. So I'm going to play the video, and then we can just you can just give us your comments on it.
It's what you want to do. I want to. There's an incident number you're supposed to get. You get an incident number so you can file a complaint afterwards. And the badge number of the officer that arrested you.
And those supervisors' names.
Get that information at bare minimum. Okay. Do you want to write it down? Oh. Your phone actually is right on top of here.
You guys, like, seriously, you're gonna see me. I live and work in this area. I lived and worked in this area. I'm a special member of this community for well over a decade. And that's what you do, because I cross the street and then proceed to sit there, hot shop in this car while 1,500 people do the exact same thing I just did. And you want to sit there and try to preach to me about my camera is on? You're lucky your camera is on. You know what? I'm not gonna say anything. I'm not even saying acknowledge.
Get the information you need.
Yes,
Oh, there it is. Sorry. Don't worry.
There you go. There you go. No, that's you know what I mean? Like here, excuse me. No, let's tell you.
Yes.
All right. So this is a video that you took, you witnessed this
Yes.
incident, Mr. Pieters, and that was, I think, in Toronto, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, it was right at the intersection of Dundas and Sackville.
Okay.
And it was around 1:30 p.m. I live in the area, so I was just coming home from court, and there was this huge crowd and about 4 police vehicles at the intersection of Dundas and Sackville. And if you notice from the video, there's like a large blue fence to the left where one of the police vehicles was 5123, because Dundas and the majority of Dundas and Sackville is closed off right now because they're repairing the water mains.
Okay.
So there was a black police officer there, and he was seen in the video. His duty was to guard the water main, that or the hole that they had there, to make sure that vehicles don't try to bully their way into that intersection.
Yeah.
And to ensure that no one falls into the hole that they were digging, and probably to protect the workers that are working there. So there were 2 Toronto community housing employees, one black and one white. And on the left side of the street there was because it's snowing and there was freezing rain and the temperature rose a few days ago. So there was huge puddles of water that people couldn't walk in. Even today, there's huge puddles of water on the street that people are trying to avoid. I had that situation when I was coming here. So the white woman and the black woman walked behind the fencing and was crossing the street. And the police officer allowed the white woman to go and grab the black woman by her arms and accused the black woman, Chioma, who has been working in the community, as you heard, for more than a decade, of not following his instructions. She tried to explain to him that, there's a puddle over there, and you know, um, we were walking here because this is the safest place to walk. And for some reason, he felt that he didn't like the fact that this black woman talked back to him as a black man. And he twisted her hands behind her back and called for backup, handcuffed her, put her in the police vehicle, and told her that she's been arrested because she assaulted him. When she never assaulted him, he had his body camera on, and his body camera would show what occurred. Um, uh, the thing about it, it happened in the middle of the day, and so you never know who would appear on the scene.
Yeah.
There was Wally Kigali, who is a very prominent member of the community. He sits on various boards in the community, very active. He was there. He was the man that was talking to her, telling her to get the go number from the police so that she could follow up later on the occurrence that happened at that intersection, because the police would have to prepare a report. And he was offering some comfort to her. I was standing off to the side, um, and I took out my camera at some point and was recording the interaction. There were other people, prominent Somali women, because there's a lot of Somalis and
Yeah.
Ethiopians
And
in
we
the community.
see that the people are all seem to be from an ethnic background.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep. And so there were lots of observers. If you notice, in that situation, it was a white officer who was trying to calm the woman down
Yeah.
and provide her with information. The black officer,
Yeah.
which is disgraceful on
Yeah.
his part, he stood there and he was trying to argue with the woman.
Yeah. I
And
agree
she
with
said,
you.
"I'm not going to say anything anymore." He
Yeah.
stood there and he instead of de-escalating the situation, instead of removing himself from the situation, he was being confrontational.
Yeah. Right. And that goes directly to the point that we were discussing just prior to showing the video, is that even a black or ethnic police officer, that does not make him immune from racial profiling or from treating differently individuals from an ethnic background. And this is clearly what we see here on this video.
Yes, and that video, I just happened to be there.
Yeah.
I just happened to be there, and it falls squarely within the conversation or the dialogue that we're having today.
Yeah.
And if you notice from the video, that lady, Chioma, she said, "Look, you arrested me, you throw me into a police vehicle, and hundreds of people, while I sat in this police vehicle, were doing the exact same thing that I did."
Yeah.
So that is differential treatment, and that is unequal policing, and that is the sort of policing that black people complain about all the time, and black people can be the perpetrator of the treatment that we complain of.
Well, and what I find is disturbing right now, especially with Project South, it's that the police officers themselves commit crimes that are even sometimes worse than the ones that they're dealing with. I mean, like this person, this poor lady that we saw in the video, I mean, she probably, maybe she does, I don't know her, but I'm assuming she may not even have a criminal record, never had any interaction with the police. To know that the police officers, some of them at least, are themselves involved behind the scenes in some major criminality is a bit disturbing.
And disconcerting, because how do we trust the police?
Yeah.
I have little confidence in the police because um the service level and the protection level for black people is slim to nil. I mean, most of the unsolved crimes and most of the unsolved homicides involve black people as victims.
As victims.
And
Yes.
you know, but to the point, that lady has no criminal record. She's a senior manager with Toronto Community Housing. In the community, she worked there for 10 years. She interacts with the police, but she interacts with the police as part of her duties. She not in a negative way, but
Yeah.
if she goes to community meetings, or if the the police want to interact with community housing, she interacts with them. No different from me in my community sometimes, where I would sit and have coffee with police officers who I know. I had coffee with some of the divisional commanders in 51 Division, that's the division, and I became friends with some of the commanders in 51 Division because they developed a relationship, because some of them felt that relationships are important, and these are white officers that they were two. Right now, the commander in 51 Division is a black man, Superintendent Ismail Musa, and there are quite a few black police officers in 51 Division. But the issue of black people being targeted is an ongoing issue, and what happened a few days ago certainly provides um, evidence of that. And back to the police corruption scandal. Who was one of the main suspect that they provided the contact information of the correctional officer to go to the home and shoot up? It was a black man.
Mhm.
It was a black youth.
Yeah.
So and we haven't heard everything yet. We haven't heard who
Yeah.
these young drug dealers were that they were providing the drugs on the street to sell. But I could surmise, I could take an education guess it was young black men.
Well, that's the thing, right? Like we still don't have a lot of information yet from that project, and but my guess is that whatever is going to be coming out from it is going to be even more disturbing than what we know right now. Um, it is, like you said, the tip of the iceberg. But then, uh, what do you think we can do or can be done to restore that trust between the police and specifically the Black community? Because this is really what we hear a lot about. And there has been, like as you mentioned, reports and inquests, and there have been some efforts at trying to understand more about this problem. But um, as we see, it's still ongoing. But what can happen in your view? What do you think can or should happen in order for things to get better?
Well, it's a whole cultural change. It's a
But
whole cultural
how do we
shift that is
change the
required.
culture? How do we
Well,
change the
well,
culture?
it has to be changed from the top down. I mean, we had people who were progressive people in the Toronto Police Service. For example, Peter Slowly, who was the deputy chief of police, and Peter Ewan, Peter Slowly was black. Peter Ewan was Chinese, and then there was a white woman who was there, Shauna Coxon, who has a PhD. And those were very progressive people who were fighting and trying to change the culture. They were all forced out. They were all forced out. We had a situation where four black senior police officers compiled a report on racial profiling, even within the police service, and they were ostracized. Peter Slowly was one of them. Keith Ford was another one of them. Uh, Fernandez and David McLeod. You know, the culture has to change. And then we had a recent situation with black superintendent who was demoted,
Mhm.
you know, Stacy Clark. So the whole culture has to change. And not only that, the culture has to change, there has to be there has to be changes within the command structure of policing, and the police culture doesn't want to hear from people like me. They don't want to hear from people like me. There are advisory committees, all kind of committees, whether it's Toronto Police, Peel Police, Durham Police, Halton Police, and they've never invited me to sit on any committee. They don't even invite me to events. There was the Black History Month event at Toronto Police. and other police services had their Black History Month events, and I learned of them from seeing it on television. And these chiefs of police, they all know me from all over Ontario. I've never been invited to their events. I mean, the chief of London police had his chief ball recently. He knows me. He could have invited me. And they don't want to hear from people like me. When you stand up for human rights principles, when you stand up against anti-Black racism, when you stand up for charter values, they view you as anti-police. And I should send you an article. There was an incident that I read in the papers. I didn't even know about it, where 6 police officers were disciplined because they were making disparaging remarks concerning me and Desmond Cole. I read it in the papers. Nobody contacted me, interviewed me about it to see how I would feel about something like that. I just sent you the link. And these are police officers in the same division where I live, 51 Division. How do I feel safe? I don't feel safe.
Well, but it seems as well that there has to be, so you mentioned a culture change, um, but there has to be also a willingness to change the culture. I mean, the culture is not going to change just like that. There has to also be a willingness to change. And if they don't invite people like you, for example, to their conferences, to their talks, to educate or to hear at least your point of view on things, then it doesn't that show that there's a reluctance that they don't really want to change if they're not inviting people who could actually provide a different view on things?
I agree. Chief Dempue and I get along fine. I get along fine with the Deputy Chief Robert Johnson. I know the Chief of Halton Police. I know the Chief of Durham Police. I know the Chief of Peel Police, Chief Duriapple, and I know his deputies, Andrews, and the rest of them. I know the Chief from London Police and the Deputy Chief of London Police. I know them all. Is it possible for you to put this article up? The 6 cops were found guilty of disparaging anti-racist advocates.
I will share that here on the screen. So this is here the article.
Yep. You see it there.
From
6 cops were
CBC.
found guilty
Yeah.
of disparaging. The report was kept secret.
Yeah.
I learned of it from CBC News.
Well, and that's what's concerning, right? Is that when we get evidence or information about this kind of incidents happening, they're kept away from the public. I mean, that's the other issue, and that contributes to the lack of trust. I mean, all these things, and again, going back to the corruption scandal with the Toronto police, is that all of these things were happening, and it was all in the dark. Nobody knew about these things. So,
That's right. It was kept behind closed doors.
yeah. And there were quite a few, at least from what we know, 7 officers from the force who were involved in this and who knew what was going on. And there must have been some people around who also knew of or who maybe felt or suspected something was going on. And
And
nothing
look,
was ever
look,
mentioned.
stop for a second.
Yeah.
One of them, and this was on Facebook, one of them said Selwyn would cry racism if I said I drank my coffee black. Another one called me a loser.
So, I mean,
And
but yeah.
okay, stop right here. No, go up a little bit more. Go up or scroll down a little bit more. Sorry. Good. Stop right there. Stop right there. So if you notice, or scroll down a little so the full picture could show. No. So the full picture there can show.
Okay.
Good. Stop now. So if you notice, I'm in the same office that I'm in right now, and you see where my scroll is. This is a report on systemic racism in the criminal justice system. These are Justice Tulloch two reports.
Mhm.
This is the Human Rights Report. That's the Human Rights Commission report. This is paying the price, the cost of racial profiling, and this is the 1992 report on policing and race relations. You can take this off the screen now. People can probably find the article on CBC
Yeah.
and read it if they like. But
So the problem is ongoing, but do you have hope that things can get better? Do you think actually that by exposing what is going on right now within the police, that that could maybe change things, or you think that no?
well, I'm hoping that things can get better.
Mhm.
I mean, a lot of energy, and a lot of goodwill is being expended to make sure that the public can have confidence in the police. Um, the policing is a two-way street where the citizens and the police have to work hand in hand. It takes two hands to clap.
Right.
So the police and the citizens have to work together. The police and the citizens have to work cooperatively, or the efforts to keep our community safe is not going to happen. And we've they've expended a lot of energy to say that, look, if we hire a more diverse police force, if we hire people from the communities, that may assist. But I think the main problem is you have to change hearts and minds.
Mhm.
You have to change hearts and minds, and it's almost like dealing with the homeless. You can't understand and appreciate the plight of a homeless person or a addicted person at Dundas and Sherborne unless you spend time with them. You can appreciate the trauma and the sort of difficulties that somebody who goes through anxiety and depression goes through unless you spend a lot of time with them. And it's the same thing that happens with Black people who have intergenerational trauma
Yeah.
and who are experiencing racism on a day-to-day basis. You have to really, you have to really get into their skin. It's like the skin I'm living in to understand, because, even sometimes parents are perplexed at the experience of their children, and because they haven't experienced what their children are going through.
But I would add as well, Mr. Peters, that you also need to be willing to, you have to have an open mind and to not be attached to your preconceptions of people or of groups as well, because you can also spend a lot of time with people, but if you have an idea about them, sometimes that won't change. You have to also be open to the possibility that the way you see things, the way you're trained to see and understand things, may actually not be the right way of seeing things. And there has to be that openness. Um, I find, I mean, I don't know if you agree with that, but I find like it also has to be a change in the attitude towards people.
I
Uh,
agree. I agree. I was doing a racial profiling case in Hamilton. And a Black police staff sergeant was in charge of court security and ramped up the security 100% or more because he felt that these were Black gang members from Toronto. One day I caught him at defense counsel table going through my papers, and so I raised it on the record before the judge. At the end of court, he cleared the court out and pulled his firearm on me. I had to call Deputy Chief Keith Ford from my cell phone to his cell phone so that there could be an ear witness to what's going on, because This police officer was trying to orchestrate a confrontation because I embarrassed him by putting his conduct on the record. And so he wanted a physical confrontation with me with no witnesses. So, and he was a black officer.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's definitely going to have to be, as we mentioned earlier, a culture change, a change in how people view or think of certain groups, and the training has to change as well.
Yep, I have another case right now before the Human Rights Tribunal, where the black it's a black young person going to work. He's the son of a CBC producer. He was going to work, and it was a black police officer that stopped him and pulled his firearm on him and treated him like he was a criminal. Of course, his father was very upset because of the trauma that
From the
befell his
encounter. Yeah.
son. And so, there's a human rights tribunal situation going on right now. The LECA, which was the Law Enforcement Complaint Authority, they ordered a hearing, and because the chief of police messed up, the chief of police, it was more than 6 months under the old Police Services Act, and the chief of police did not send it to the Police Services Board to be approved and ratified to bypass the 6 months. And so the police tribunal dismissed the case.
Wow.
So the divisional court gave it a 3-line summary. It said Mr. Sodi was arrested at a traffic stop. He alleged that Constable Alan Arakaza, without having required grounds, arrested him, pointed a firearm at him, and placed him on the ground with a knee on his back. Constable Arakaza is black, and Mr. Sodi was a young black man with the afro. So these sort of negative treatment occurs to black people from black people.
Right.
The other case I dealt with is a guy named Mr. Kusi. He was shot multiple times by 2 assailants, and he alleged that because Constable Andrea Chalmers' failure to disclose evidence, the court proceedings were stayed. Constable Chalmers had evidence that she was supposed to disclose to the Crown so the Crown can disclose it to the defense. And she never did until the last moment. So the defense brought a charter application and was successful. So, sometimes black people are victims of police misconduct, and there's no justice.
Yeah.
There was none for Kevin Kusi, and there was none for Mr. Sodi.
Which is,
And the divisional court was very sympathetic and disturbed about it, but they couldn't do anything about it because this is what the divisional court said. The decision is Kusi 2025 ONSC 6123.
mhm.
And this is what it said in paragraph 54. Again, this situation is unsatisfactory because it leaves potentially meritorious complaints that involve serious allegations of anti-Black racism unresolved through no fault of the complainants. The 6-month deadline at the heart of the issue has now been eliminated on the CPSA, so this issue will not reoccur. But the thing about it is, the police chief, in the face of misconduct by these officers, stymied the process so that there was no justice. And that's why the court said, this is an unsatisfactory result, but there's nothing that we can do. Our hands are tied here.
Which is really frustrating because that's similar to another problem. We're not going to get into it here because that's its own topic, but the courts have also expressed their frustration when it comes to the jail conditions, for example. And they keep saying, we keep hearing about this all the time, and there doesn't seem like anything can happen. We don't know what we can do. I mean, there was a recent decision from Justice Molloy from the Superior Court expressing this frustration about jail conditions and how they're not improving. They're still horrible, and it just feels like the courts feel helpless faced with that situation. And the same thing also applies in this interaction between the police and racialized communities, and especially the Black community. And it's really frustrating when the courts see, notice, express their frustration, and can't do anything. Now, I do want to end this though on a positive note. One thing I think, is that maybe what we're seeing now with what's appearing in the investigation into the Toronto Police Service, maybe that will change their culture. It will force them to change their culture, maybe. Um, Someone has, like, I mean, they have to be held accountable for some of the things that happened, and don't, maybe I'm naive in believing that, but I hope, because to be honest, I've never experienced or, witnessed something like that where there's a big scandal affecting multiple police officers on that level. I mean, we've had individual officers involved in some issues, but this is bigger. It's more an organized crime kind of thing. So maybe that will force them to change their culture. I'm hoping. Do you
Well, we
think?
had that before. We had the shakedowns in the entertainment district
Mhm.
where a whole bunch of police officers from 52 Division was involved. We had issues with the organized crime, the Central East Drug Squad. So we had systemic issues before, and they continue. I'm not optimistic that
Okay.
this province-wide investigation that the Inspector General ordered is going to result in anything positive, because the Toronto Police Association, which spends a lot of money that comes from taxpayers and their officers, they are already resisting the Inspector General's investigation, and of course they're going to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars or even more on lawyers to protect those officers and to defend them, even though they say, well, we consider this on a case by case basis. These police associations are going to resist very strenuously any sort of um, any sort of drive to dig deep into these matters. And as well, it depends on who the Inspector General
Right.
appoints as this so-called independent person.
Mhm.
What ties does the person have to the justice system? What ties does the person have to policing? What sort of biases the person have? Because let's say you could be pro-police, and you could be strongly anti-corrupt. But if you're pro-police and pro-protecting the police, then your report is going to be watered down and certainly aiming to absolve the police from any systemic issues and just blame it on a few bad apples.
Yeah.
So, we have to wait and see. But unfortunately, I'm not optimistic.
Well, as you say, we'll have to wait and see. I like to be optimistic and hope that better things are yet to come. So we'll see, I guess. I mean, I know you're speaking from experience, and you've had a lot of direct interactions and involvement in these types of cases. So I know that you come from an experienced perspective. From my own more naive and optimistic perspective, I hope that things will get better. But we're just discovering more and more as time goes by about what's going on. And hopefully, we'll just have to wait and see. And then maybe we can have another interview, Mr. Peters, where we talk more about this because, as you said, it is a systemic problem. So we'll definitely have more to say about this in the
Yes,
future.
and I agree with you.
So I want to thank you very much for taking the time. It was really very interesting, as always. And I really hope to have you again as a guest on Law Break.
Yes, and thank you very much. And let me say to you that the Ontario Bar Association has a bloco coming up for Black History Month,
Mhm.
where all lawyers who are members and non-members of the Ontario Bar Association are invited, and usually Black judges, Black lawyers, even the Chief Justice Tulloch normally shows up, and students show up. So there's usually hundreds of people at the Ontario Bar Association place at 20 Toronto Street. So lawyers can check your emails and register. It's free. Come out and have some social social quotient with Black lawyers and Black judges for Black History Month.
Nice. Thank you very much for letting us know. And so, for anyone who's watching this, this will be, I'm sure, a really amazing event. If you're in Toronto, if you live there or you're there at that time, that would be really nice to join. Again, thank
Yes, and you could wear your flowery clothes, your carnival clothes, because there'll be West Indian music and there'll be dancers in
that's
carnival costumes.
I'm sure it's all going to be positive vibes. It's always happy and a very festive vibe. So that's
Yes,
really nice. Thank you again, Mr. Peters. That was really very nice to chat with you.
thank you very much, and thank you for having me on your program for the second time.
I'm very happy. Hope to see you soon.
Yeah, goodbye.
Bye.